John, thanks for your time. Thanks for the book as well. I have it here. The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos. Let's begin with that word chaos, because this is going to be a college football season unlike any other. 12-team playoff, conference realignments, obviously NIL. The main culprit of chaos right now in college football, where would you begin?
I think a lot of it, just for those things you talk about, is probably the TV money, right? I think that's driven a lot of the different decisions that have led to the moment we're at, whether that's, an opportunity to expand the 12-team playoff because there's more money to be made doing that, whether that's the conference realignment. We've seen schools like USC and UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. The reason why they are in the Big Ten, not the Pac-12, is because of the TV money. So I think money in general drives everything. I don't think that's necessarily unique to college sports, but I think especially 40 years, but I think even just the last 5 years, I think it's never been more prevalent. And I think part of the challenge that college sports finds itself in is that there's just a lot of people who are making decisions who might not be super knowledgeable about it. University presidents who don't really know college football. So that's where it's easy to get, seduced by the money that's flowing in. And I think it's led to some great things. There's a lot that I'm really excited about because of that. But there's also some things along the way that have, been challenging or issues.
One of the reasons why this season will also be so unique is no Nick Saban, right? You've covered him ad nauseum, written books on him. Is it as simple as name, image, and likeness is such a big part of the equation that Nick Saban is no longer leading the Crimson Tide, or is it much deeper than that?
I think that's a big part of it. I think it fits into an overall change that's happening within college football. And I think the thing with Nick Saban that I always come back to, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but he's all about control. This is a guy who eats the same thing for breakfast and lunch every day, wears the same thing. Like, he likes to control every minute of his day. He liked to control his environment at Alabama to the best of his abilities. And this current world we live in is uncontrollable, right? I think Lane Kiffin's the one who first pointed it out, but I think it's really smart is, only in college football could you have 2 periods of free agency, one of which happens during the most important part of the season, which is in December and January when,
right,
teams are getting ready to try to win a national championship. Like, could you imagine if free agency started in the NFL during the playoffs? I mean, that would be insane. We would never accept that. But that's where college football is at right now. And so I think that was really challenging for Nick to kind of get his arms around. It's not like he didn't have experience at the professional level. He obviously was an NFL head coach, but I think he liked his ability to control his environment to the best of his abilities. If he needed a top recruit, he would outwork people to try to get him. And I think the changing of the guard that's happening within college football from NIL, transfer portal, other major factors, I think made him realize he was losing his grip a bit on the sport. And so I think that, coupled with his advancing age, he was in his early 70s. He's been doing it for 50 plus years. Obviously, you're going to slow down a little bit over time, and the retirement rumors continued to swirl. And I think he realized that made it harder for him to hire the type of people he wanted to fill his staff with. So those factors all combined are ultimately the reason why when we turn on our TV on Saturday, we're seeing him on College game day instead of on the sidelines.
Power 5 conference, now Power 4 conference, into a 12-team tournament. Top 4 get in from the winners of those power conferences. So that means, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that means that Notre Dame cannot finish higher than a 5 seed, right?
Correct.
Is it now not a great place for them to be as an independent, or is there still some strength in the way that Notre Dame operates?
I think it's all about how you spin it, right? I've already started thinking a little bit about this, and I don't think I'm the only one who has, but there's an argument that, of course, it'd be great to have, a top 4 seed in which you have a bye, right? But
right,
if you can be really good and you lock in, say, the 5 seed, in which you're going to then get the 12 seed the first, matchup, which is likely going to be a group of 5 school because they get an automatic bid. That feels like a path that, can get you to the next round. And then you'd like to be playing the number 4, and that's either going to be probably a Big 12 team or an ACC team. So you're not necessarily going to get the top SEC team or top Big 10 team, most likely, right? So there's a path where you can say, all right, maybe there's some value to being, a 5 seed if that's where you can get. But this is kind of the spot that they have wanted to be in. They have purposely avoided being in a conference. They have had many opportunities to be. If they wanted to be in the Big Ten right now, they could be, but they like their independence. And so there is, not to uh, not to make a play in the book, but there is a price to pay for that independence. And I think that not being in the top four is part of it, but big picture wise, it could actually be to their advantage certain years if you get kind of a favorable run to a possible title game.
Big Ten no longer, and it wasn't 10, it was 14 teams. It is now 18 teams in the Big Ten. USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington now in the Big Ten. If you're not schools like Michigan and Ohio State, if you're Illinois or Northwestern, what does that ultimately mean to those types of schools to have four big schools from the now no longer Pac-12 jump in the Big Ten?
It's getting harder, right?
Yeah.
The path to leveling up just got harder. And, one of the teams that we write about a good bit in this book is Maryland, which I think is at that same level, right? And, talking a lot to Mike Loxley, it's challenging to be kind of stuck in the middle where you are in a big conference and you have some advantages, but you don't have all the advantages. You don't have all the NIL money. You don't have necessarily the pedigree of a Michigan or Ohio State. So when you try to level up, it's really tough. It's always been tough, but I think it's gotten harder. And I think in particular, adding, UCLA is down right now. USC is not quite at its power, but USC is, of course, an iconic program. Oregon and Washington are both in pretty good places, especially Oregon right now. It's hard. It's really hard for those programs to be able to talk yourself into, can we go 9 wins? Can we go 10 wins? Well, you just added 4 schools that are probably going to be pretty hard outs for a lot of different schools. I do think the one benefit if you're a Maryland or a Rutgers is that you've gotten rid of divisions. Now that's bad for Illinois and Northwestern, which I think have, and Wisconsin, which have benefited, from the easier division. There was an easier path, I think, for those guys to win. Whereas, Maryland and Rutgers had to play Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan every single year. At least that's not guaranteed. So that's a little benefit from it. But, that's these realignment moves, and we've seen it in the SEC too with Texas and Oklahoma. It doesn't hurt the upper echelon, but those middle of the pack ones that you think every 3 years maybe we can make a run. I just think it's gotten harder for them to be able to do that now.
Financially, does it benefit them?
It does, but I wrote this in the book. Like, nobody's hanging banners for how much money they make, right?
Right.
Like people
Yeah.
want to see wins. They want to see championships.
Your athletic director, Mike.
Yeah, and that's great.
All right.
But, and that maybe that helps them, and that's part of it. But, at the end of the day, if I'm a fan, I want to see my team win. I want to be able to talk myself into, if everything breaks right, we can make the NCAA tournament, or we can make the playoff, whatever it might be, whatever your sport is. And at a certain point, I don't know how much that money benefits you. Now, it does separate you from other places, right? So the Big Ten and the SEC have obviously separated themselves at this point as the clear top two. They're making the most money. And these realignment moves just further enhance that. So you've separated yourselves from the ACC, the Big 12, and of course, all the other smaller conferences. But, within your own conference, does it help you? Not really. I mean, again, it can help pay for other things, but everybody's getting the same cut, at least as it is right now. So if you're a Mississippi State or an Indiana, adding those premier programs into your conference, yeah, it's great. More money, you can pay for more things. That's awesome. But, if it doesn't lead to more wins down the line, I don't know that helps you that much beyond just being able to tell maybe your bosses, hey, we've got a really good, revenue margin this year.
Right. And John, you covered this in the book as well, but 5 years ago, if I had told you, by the way, the Pac-10 then, the Pac-12 would be completely chewed up and spit out and no longer exist, how shocked would you have been?
Yeah, I mean, really shocked. And I think what I think is kind of amazing as somebody who's covered this for a while is that it felt like if there was one to go, it was going to be the Big 12. It always felt like the Big 12 was kind of on the verge of extinction, and they've lost multiple schools along the way. And there was that famous, we detailed in the book, but that famous Larry Scott run at trying to raid the Big 12, which would have probably killed the Big 12. And yet somehow the Big 12 just kept finding a way to survive. And so when we always, realignment is a fun thing to talk about, especially speculation, and all of that speculation over the years, it was always like, all right, you'll go for XYZ in the Big 12, and then, maybe they fold away. And that almost happened, a couple of years ago after Texas and Oklahoma went to the SEC. The Pac-12 had an opportunity to add the Big 12, either all of them or some of them, and they ultimately didn't do that. And that proved to be, one of the major reasons why the Pac-12 is dead right now. But yeah, I mean, 5 years ago, there was a lot to like about the Pac-12. You have iconic institutions, and I think the Pac-12, maybe more than any conference, embodies, I think, the overall college sports experience, right? They're so good at all these other sports that maybe don't make money, but, the Cals and Stanfords of the world and the Olympians that they produce, they've had such an impact in so many different sports that to imagine it all being, gone really in, a couple of days stretch last year is pretty stunning. And I don't think we still have felt all of the long-term ramifications of what that means.
The title of the book, besides the price, it also, what it takes to win. Give me 4 college football programs that are the best at what it takes to win in 2024. Who knows what 2025 will look like in college football, the way things continue to change. But right now, who is the best at doing what it takes to win in this era?
Yeah, the ones that come to mind for me right off the top of the bat, Ohio State, I think, is number one. Oregon is another one. Georgia is another one. And then, I think Ole Miss might be the fourth one that I would have. And the reason why I picked those is that I think, Ohio State and Oregon are at the far end of how much money they're spending on NIL. They've been very, very aggressive there. Ohio State's AD has talked publicly that they've spent $20 million on this football team this year, which is a pretty absurd amount. That's double than the vast, vast majority of anybody's spending. Oregon has been very aggressive as well, and they have a guy named Phil Knight who's been able to help in that regard.
Yeah,
but I think Georgia's been a great. Yeah, he's doing okay. Yeah. He's spending a lot of money. We've got a good anecdote in the book about how this guy who's trying to get a deal done with Oregon's collective, and they couldn't get it done because Phil Knight hadn't woken up yet, and they needed Phil Knight to wake up and sign off on it. That's the level of insight that he had into that. But those are two, and then in the SEC, like Ole Miss has gone all in. Lane Kiffin's embraced being the portal king. They've gone very aggressive in adding a bunch of guys who feel like a real win now moment for them. And Georgia, they've won 2 of the last 3 national championships. And I think Kirby Smart, maybe more than anyone, has a good balance of building a strong culture, but also having an NIL component to it. I think he's a modern, maybe a bit evolved version of Nick Saban. In the book, we refer to Nick Saban as the old king and Kirby's the young prince. And he's kind of the one who's meant to inherit the kingdom here. And I think he's done a good job of not letting NIL be corrosive within his very carefully manicured culture. And, you look at the season about to start, Georgia feels as good of a pick to win it all as anybody. And I think that's a real testament to how he has built that thing and evolved with all these changes that have come throughout college football.
John, I'm about 5 chapters in. If you're a college football fan, it is must read, and it's fascinating. And it's a little bit of a handbook to keep up with how we got to where we are. From name, image, and likeness, from conference realignment to the 12 teams that we're going to watch in the playoffs this year, which should be fascinating. Congratulations on the book to you and Armin. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you saying that.